We're recording now.
I thought you'd be able to pick up on the body language that I'm conveying
Yeah,
right
body
now.
language on a fucking voice call.
I'm gesturing like mad. You should be able to pick it up. Well, okay, regardless, we know now.
Yeah, okay,
So
to fill in everyone who wasn't here 30 seconds
which is
ago.
everyone except for you and I.
Yeah, so it's not everyone technically.
All right, smart guy, fill him in. Let's go.
Okay, so quick rundown. This episode is gonna be about LSD Dream Emulator, and we did so many awesome scientific research and stuff. We dug into all the articles, all the Wikipedia stuff. We played the game. Uh,
Hey man, don't talk
Chris
it up too much. I don't want to sound like an idiot now.
Chris
now you're
just
now you're
found
bragging.
Chris just found that the director of this game has a Twitter account, and
Yeah,
it's
you just
everything you could possibly expect from it, and I'm in love with it. Just followed it.
it's we're definitely gonna abuse the amazing thing. That'll be our stupid bit. That'll be our recurring joke that we say amazing
Amazing.
constantly.
Yeah, why not?
Okay. All right. Play uh Jimmy, play the title card for us. We don't have a title card. All right. Hello and welcome to Dialup Dessert, a podcast about art, games, and nostalgia. My name is Chris.
My name is Garrett.
And today we're going to be talking about a niche little title for the PlayStation called LSD Dream Emulator. The name immediately conjures ideas of, the psychoactive drug, and I think that was intentional. The guy who composed this game, Osamu Sato, was known for his rather weird projects. From having read a lot of his biographical info, he just kind of did whatever art was weirdest at the time, and he got very into like computerized stuff and produced a few games in his time. Actually, all of them incredibly bizarre. You could probably call them the earliest versions of like walking simulator kind of games where you just experience the game.
Oh
You don't
yeah.
really do much else. So, real quick, introduce y'all who haven't heard about this game. I can't imagine there's that many. I guess there's basically like three kinds of people here, right? There's weirdos like me that keep playing this game on emulators and desperately want to copy. There's people who have heard about it and are like subscribed to friggin' PewDiePie or whatever and watch him play it. And then there's boomers who always end up being the last category for some reason.
Okay,
I'm not sure
boomer.
why that is. This game was released in October of 1998 for, again, the PlayStation 1. Uh, Interestingly, because of its limited release, it was only released in Japan, um, and because of the very short amount of time that copies were even produced, and from what I understand, it's kind of poor reception, it pretty much fell into obscurity until much more recently, which we'll discuss. And oh, imagine that old media being revived on a show about nostalgia.
Wowie.
um, so real quick, Garrett, you and I played the game again recently to sort of bring back the painful memories of early 3D video gaming.
What do you mean
Uh,
painful?
what what did you have? What were your initial thoughts walking into this bizarro nightmare?
I'd be surprised if there was a person that played this game and did not think it was like one of the most weirdest thing they'd ever experienced. Um,
I Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely up there in weirdness, and what makes it like most bizarre is that this wasn't some dinky little indie release. Like this was a professionally made product released for a console. It's not something put on itch.io. Itch.io. It's like it was a proper console game. I guess this was kind of the Wild West era of like video game stuff, so you could make weird things. But still, this game's pretty extensive for how out there it is.
Yes, this game. Around this time, there was starting to develop a concept of game design and level design, and this game defies all of that. There's some rules, but there's not a whole lot.
Yeah, to speak about it more specifically, for those of you who haven't played it, maybe you've only heard about it, and for those of you who have never played it, you should look it up. It's very interesting. Um, the game takes place in a series of days. At the end of each dream sequence, you are returned to the main menu, and you can save, load, or start a new day, and you continue on through the days. And at increments, the dreams you experience on each day become increasingly warped and distorted and surreal. And they're already pretty warped and distorted and surreal to begin with because you're playing on pretty primitive hardware with equally primitive, software trying to represent sometimes very complex things. The PlayStation 1 was not known for its incredible graphic fidelity, but it was able to represent 3D space, I guess.
Yeah.
In game, you can really only move around and look at things. You can't. There's no interact button. You have tank controls, so you have to spin your character around to face things in order to walk towards them, which makes it rather difficult when you're trying to evade, for example, the gray man who will mess with one of the game mechanics. We'll get back to that. But when trying to evade him, it's kind of hard because you control like a very slow tank.
Yeah, most I want to say that most PlayStation games from the original console had tank controls. This is before analog sticks were a thing, and the only means of moving was using the directional keys on the left side of the controller.
Which, to be fair, that was a technical limitation, and more importantly, the more sophisticated concepts about how a character can maneuver in 3D space hadn't been developed because this was the very beginning of trying to deal with this kind of thing. PC games would figure this out a little quicker, but I mean, even as soon as the first Halo game, that shit was perfected. And that was only in 2002 that game came out, so only a couple years later. So it's pretty impressive actually to see in how short in a time it went from extremely crude, unrefined gameplay in LSD to really solid, full 3D motion in the first Halo game and other shooters of the time. Now, I guess what bears mentioning is while there isn't a lot of specific actions the character can take other than walking around and experiencing the dream, there is an astonishing amount of things in this weird little game. I've read over what I can on the wiki. The wiki, by the way, is kind of sadly not very well maintained. It's got some weird grammatical issues, like the person who wrote it isn't a native English speaker, but it's not a condemnation of the effort they put in, because they put together this wiki, and they get points for that. But a lot of the pages are extremely short or don't describe a thing very well.
One thing that I would really like is this game is starting to pop back into the niche audiences. I'd really love it for people to start contributing to start discovering this game again and start contributing to the wiki, because there are a lot of unexplored mysteries about this game that no one knows about.
And I think in a more general way, I know people will just cry ceaselessly about walking simulators, but there is something to be said about games that are not so much a game as they are just a weird interactive environment. I guess that's what a game is. But just a 3D digital space. I mean, not even 3D, they don't necessarily have to be, but a space that you are pretty free to explore and experience, but that does not explicitly have any mechanical gameplay. I think there's still a lot of actual genuine artistic value in that. Even this game, which at times is trying to be very humorous or trying to be very scary, and if we get to it, I will mention the numerous ways that this game has made me, nearly drop the controller in terror. Uh, as primitive as the graphics are, I think that only makes them scarier at times.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had some moments that really freaked me out. But one thing I do want to mention real quick is I definitely have to agree that I believe the director wanted to create an anti-game here. We already discussed before that it defies many of the typical conventions that
Conventions.
were around
Yeah.
at the time with game design, and it's definitely one of the first instances of video games as art. Something that was definitely more taboo than it is nowadays, where people are much more accepting of the medium producing games that are considered to be art.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, granted, we don't see very many new mediums being produced, but video games are the very recent one that a lot of people may have been alive, well, that are still alive, would have experienced the birth of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of began as like a product. They were a simple electronic toy, and even up until the late 90s, that's kind of all they were. They
Yeah.
were a thing to be sold, so they had to squeeze money out of you. But I'll be damned if this game is going to squeeze money out of everyone, or out of anyone, rather, because it doesn't do a very good job of making me want to buy it. I pretty much only want it as like a collector item because I don't think I would ever want to really play this game a whole lot.
I would definitely play this game again.
Yeah, you
Uh,
think?
I got through. I got through about 20 nights, which are the levels basically, and there's really something oddly comforting about it. There's always something new to find and explore, despite really early on, despite being able to know your way around all the different dream environments that you're in. There's always new encounters per se.
Well, the game does incorporate a really fascinating system that a lot of people, when talking about the game, will likely bring up, wherein the music, which is all composed by this same artist, Osamu Sato, um, distorts and is rearranged and altered in all sorts of fascinating ways to make hundreds of possible soundtracks to be playing in the background alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, there's all sorts of strange little sound effects that'll play as you walk across various kinds of terrain or as different things move through the environment around you. The sounds are not very good, I should add. They are extremely primitive. For the longest time, there's a desert area in the open nature kind of zone. Um, and for the longest time, I thought artillery was landing or maybe lightning was striking. It was this distant booming sound. And I looked up and I realized it's supposed to be the sound of this condor's wings flapping, or like a desert eagle of
Oh,
some kind.
yeah.
For the longest time, I thought it was like something exploding in the distance, but no, it's literally the sound of a bird flapping overhead. So, to give you a sense of how primitive a lot of the tech here was, or maybe that was just, an afterthought and they just needed a sample that sounded kind of like the thing they wanted.
One interesting thing I've noticed about the music is that it's not directly tied with the environment you're in. It's always changing, and I want to say randomized. There'd be instances where you'd be walking through the abandoned town and it's just playing uncharacteristically joyful music, and it kind of adds to the creepy atmosphere to it.
Yeah, a lot of the environments. So, okay, to quickly explain once again to people who haven't played the game, you begin a dream in one of several different locations. I want to say there's like 14. I can't remember exactly how many there are. There's quite a few, um, and each can have a differently colored sky. If it has a sky, there's a couple that don't have like an outdoor area, um, and each can have randomly scrambled music. It can have new creatures and other entities roaming around inside of it. And some are specific to some areas, like the gray man, for example, that I mentioned earlier, likes to spawn in the violence district, which is this nighttime cityscape on a dock, and he doesn't tend to spawn in the natural world, which is this outdoor grassy area. Um, but in addition, the longer you play, the more distorted and corrupted the environments themselves become, and not in a really advanced way, like not what we would expect with new encounters and new weird entities showing up. But instead, the world itself gets retextured in various ways. The wiki describes them kind of weirdly. Uh, the wiki describes normal textures, which are, the ones you would expect. It describes sexual textures. I don't know why on
Really?
earth. I don't know why they chose that naming. But those are the ones that are extremely vibrant, often feature a lot of eyes and faces. And those are the ones that I found to be the most pants-shitting terrifying, if only because they sometimes entirely replace certain objects. So there's one area that is these two suns with faces on them looking at one another with a bridge spanning them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you enter it, you enter through the mouth of one, and after walking the bridge a bit, the other one will then come into view, and you walk through his mouth to exit the bridge, right? But the sexual texture is this, LSD fueled nightmare. Wow, hey, how fitting that the game is called that.
He said the name.
It's this extremely psychedelic figure with big eyes with all sorts of like elaborate geometric shapes radiating out from it.
Yeah, I definitely didn't experience that. I want to say the most interesting thing about this game is that we both played the same game, but we have entirely different experiences, at least starting out.
Yeah, the game always starts off in the cottage, in the same room actually, and that is, I think, where our playthroughs stopped being the same, was that first room.
Yeah.
Because I, like an idiot, immediately looked down, which causes the room to turn black and red.
Whoa.
Lovely. And you look up, and there's a giant baby man coming through the wall, and his big fucking face right in front of you, and then he begins crawling towards you. And I forgot how to move backward because I had my stuff bound to my keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
and so the baby man ate me, or I don't know what he does to you, but he sends you to the next stream.
Ugh.
Yeah, so that was lovely. If I can make a recommendation, if you ever get to the point where the textures are being corrupted, so there's four types of textures. There's normal, there's the kanji textures where text appears on everything in Japanese, but usually the text just describes the names of the things. And then there's the downer textures where everything's in like bloody red, and the characters have these big, creepy, cartoony eyes. And then the sexual textures, I said before, are the last ones that tend to appear. It also has like an eyeball motif, but is sometimes you'll get walls covered in eyeballs or all sorts of psychedelic shapes. Sometimes, if you play the game for too long, you get variations on these textures where textures from other areas that are not appropriate for this area again right now will begin appearing there. Sometimes the game will just crash if you play for too long without saving and quitting, which is
Is that a problem with the emulator?
no, it's just a problem across all versions of the game.
Really? The original
Yep.
PlayStation version just crashes if you play too long?
Actually, I don't know if that one will crash, but I know it'll probably like freeze if you play it for so many days without stopping to save.
Is
Um,
is that by
I
design?
I don't know. I think the game just wants you to save every like 40 days or so, because that's when the new textures stop appearing after day 40, and it resets back to the normal textures.
Oh wow.
And I played to day 65 or so,
Jeez.
enough to see the kanji textures appearing again. And at that point, it stops being really alarming and new.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are still plenty of really weird encounters to be had. There's a lion that I didn't know could spawn, and it mauls you when you walk too close to it, and it has a very uh, realistic looking face compared to the rest of the texturing in the game.
Yeah.
It's a flat triangle for a head, but it has a very nicely textured lion face.
Yikes. It's
Yeah,
crazy,
that.
man. I only made it to 20 or so days, and Like, it got to the point where the textures turned into the text, but I had no idea about all that additional stuff.
To be fair, while a lot of it is very interesting, the game is, like you were saying, it is pretty calm. Even when you're in the violence district, or even when you're seeing some of the more horrifying visuals, it's a thing where you can kind of calmly take in what's happening because there isn't really any actual danger to you. The worst thing that can happen is the dream will end.
Mm-hmm.
Even when the gray man touches you, all he does is take away the flashback feature, which lets you replay the previous night. But I never even used that feature, so it didn't even matter to me.
What do you actually do with that feature?
If you had a particularly interesting dream, maybe you spawn in a cool location or there were cool texture distortions you want to see again, you can go and see it again.
Huh, that's
Maybe
really...
try going through the dream in a different way, touch different objects, or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So supposedly in the game, from what I understand on the wiki and from what I've read in discussion, um, touching various objects are different things in the game are associated in different ways, and they will tend to send you to other locations. So, for example, touching the corpse that you find in the violence district, as long as the guy isn't standing next to it kicking it, you can walk up and touch the corpse, and it'll teleport you again to the violence district, but you'll be off off the edge of a building like a freaking Looney Tunes character. As soon as you look down or try and move, then I guess your character realizes he can't be there because you fall down and the dream ends.
Yeah, that happened to me, I remember.
It happened to me a couple of times too.
Do you know if the screen transitions like have anything to do or indicate what kind of dream you're going into or which environment you're going into next? Because I noticed a lot of different, whether it be like running into a wall or a door or an object, there would be a different flash of color that would transport me to the next dream. Is that have any significance?
So what I've been able to find, there aren't very good answers for a lot of these things. Unfortunately, there's probably better discussion about this game in Japan. Unfortunately, I speak no Japanese,
Neither do I.
if you can believe it. But what I've been able to find is the color transition has to do with the thing that you touched and the connotation it has. So in the game, there's a chart that appears at the end of each dream, displaying upper, downer on one axis and static and dynamic on the other axis. Now, upper and downer don't mean like good or bad dream, from what I understand, because I've had dreams that are friggin' terrifying, and it still puts it in the upper area. So I think upper is like there were lots of colors, maybe, whereas downer there wasn't a lot,
Okay.
and maybe static, not much happened, and dynamic, very unique things happened. I don't really know, because I've had playthroughs where I'm in the what is the Funland one called, the Happy Town, I think. Yeah, Happy Town, the extremely colorful area
Is
with
that
the
the
very
little
loud floor tile.
Toyland looking one?
Yes, with the floor tiles that sound like screaming Pikachu's.
Yeah, that one was really not good for my eyes. To be honest, a lot of the game was.
Yeah, yeah. When emulating the game, there's a bizarre bug that occurs that causes all water to flash
Oh,
white
Jesus,
and the
yeah.
normal color of the water extremely quickly. And the first time I went to Happy Town, the gray man spawned, which scared the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the water was like crimson, and it was flashing red and white. And if I had epilepsy, that probably would have given me a seizure. It was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah, I had to look away so many times. There would be instances where I'd just be surrounded by lakes and whatnot. Not fun. Surprisingly, the jumping into the lakes don't like do anything to you, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, some areas don't even let you fall off cliffs, but like everything else in the game, contacting things or falling off of things either ends the dream immediately. In the case of falling off cliffs, you tend to just wake up.
Mm-hmm.
But touching things like the water just sends you another dream typically. I do think it was interesting how many dreams I got anyway that were just a black screen with white text.
Yeah.
Um, I should find out what they translate to sometime. But they just said some stuff in Japanese, just white columns of text and nothing else. And the dream ends, and then it would always place it right in the dead center of the grid.
Yeah, there was an instance where I got like 4 straight days of just text walls, and sometimes an FMV also plays, and that would be your dream for that night.
Yeah, there are a few FMVs that you can get. There's one really extensive one that I've seen. I don't know how on earth you trigger it, but you can get it in a regular dream. You can get to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, generally when you get the FMVs, that's the whole dream, and then your character just wakes up at the end, and you get some surreal imagery or shots of a city or whatever,
Ooh.
which are all excellent background like video fodder if you're gonna make like a top city pop hits mega mix on YouTube or something.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, some of it is very satisfying, like nostalgic imagery. Lots of rain and looking out of car windows and such.
It has the vaporwave aesthetic in the vaporwave era.
How fitting. Can you imagine that this era had things that are now nostalgic to us? That's weird.
Wowie.
I guess I would have been 4 when this game came out, so I don't know if I'm really nostalgic for that era, but whatever. So, okay, so I found this article that I wanted to discuss, and this is I found this article some time ago because I've always kind of been a fan of this game since as early as I can remember being able to use the internet, and I was a rather dumb child, so I didn't know that you could do things other than play Warcraft 3.
Wait, hold on.
Until I was like 12. What's
one
up?
Of the reasons this game rose back up into niche popularity was because I want to say like Let's Players, right? Like, how did you find out about this game?
So I found out about it in 2009 or 2010. I was in... Hold on. Let me do some quick math. 2008. I was in middle school still. And my friend and I would hang out every day after school and play Halo or like Assassin's Creed or whatever games were out. I can't remember what games it was. Oh, Guitar Hero was a common one. But we started getting bored of like, these new games are cool, but they always cost like a lot of money to get. And we're getting tired of them. So like, let's find some like old games. Maybe those are cheaper. And we would end up discovering that you can emulate PlayStation 1 games on like, the terrible HP laptop I had this at the time. And I was digging through games and I found one entitled LSD Dream Emulator. I'm like, oh, well, we gotta play that. And so we spent several nights in a row when it was all rainy outside, so we couldn't do anything, just playing that game and pooping our pants.
Jesus.
It wasn't even really that scary, but we kept psyching each other out,
So you know a whole lot more about this game than I do. I've only been playing it for a couple of hours. I've known about it.
To be fair, I was an extremely stupid child. I continue to be an extremely stupid child, but I was also. So I didn't absorb a whole lot of info, and I forgot quite a bit about how to emulate things, so I had to relearn all that anyway.
Yeah.
Now, I found this article a little while ago, and when we were discussing what we wanted to do for this episode, I remembered this game, and like, what a perfect fit for the topic of our show, which is art, media, and nostalgia. And boy, is this game all of those things. It's also a horror, kinda, and it's also a walking simulator. And I want to talk about walking simulators a lot because I know people like to dump on them, and I like to talk about things that people hate and talk about how great they are. And I like to dump on things people love.
The one
so
thing.
That is what we're going to do.
The one guy that likes walking simulators.
Hey, there are dozens of us, okay? Dozens. Anyway, a while back, I found this article, and I forgot about it. It was written in 2015 for Vice's tech section motherboard. It's entitled The Elusive Creator of the Most Terrifying Video Games. In his first interview in years, Osamu Sato, the shadowy creator behind some of the most bizarre video games ever, speaks out. this is where I found out about Osamu Sato's Twitter and his. I mean, they're not really scary or surreal or weird. It's mostly just fans sending him screenshots from the game, and then him replying in Japanese that I can't read, and then him posting selfies of him and his friends drinking. Um, so I found out through this a lot of the biographical info that I also later found on Wikipedia and sort of on the LSD wiki, but again, the LSD wiki is kind of not very well written. It is worth mentioning, though, that so this game is based on a dream journal, right?
Yeah.
Before I get to the article, really quick, the game is based on a dream journal, but it's not Sato's dream journal. It's a oh shoot, where is it? It is instead the
I got the
dream
name.
journal. You got the name?
Yeah, okay. So, Having Dreams is the main setting. Comes from another director on the project. His name is Hiroko Nishikawa, who kept a documented dream journal over the course of about a decade. Many ideas and
Nailed it.
concepts were pulled
Got
from
it.
this.
It only took us 3 tries. All right. Yeah, the dream journal is pretty fascinating.
Actually,
It's like there's a full book that you can get. Um, and it's got all sorts of bizarre mixtures of 3D models and like glitch art and Japanese and English text all over it. And it's this fascinating little book of dreamscapes and notes on dreams. It's truly bizarre and very fitting to be the inspiration for such a game.
I actually believe, I think I remember reading this earlier, but I'm pretty sure that some of the text walls that we were talking about earlier are just excerpts from that journal, if I remember correctly.
It is very likely. That would make a heck of a lot of sense. So the article goes on and gives some brief biographical info. He was born in 1960. He graduated from Kyoto Institute of Tech. Interestingly, he creates a freelance entertainment firm known as Osamu Sato Design Office. So this is when he would start working with all sorts of multimedia projects, made all sorts of art installations, and these would be on display in Tokyo in the 1990s. In 94, he instead decided to fund a new studio known as Outside Directors Company, which is still in business today, but operating outside of the video game industry. I guess they no longer produce games, which is probably a good move because that does not seem like a very lucrative market. Producing weird artsy walking simulators, I mean. Producing other kinds of games is probably very lucrative. So I'm not going to read this whole article. It's quite good, though. If you're interested in the game, you should read the article, and we'll post a link to it in the description.
Yeah, good idea.
It's basically a quick bio on this guy, and a talk about how until he created his Twitter in 2009, you wouldn't really be able to find much info about the dude. He created another game, Eastern Mind, The Souls of Tong No, in 1994. And he's created a few others. He's made all sorts of weird art installations, and a lot of them are really, I mean, they're definitely the kind of thing I'm interested in because I'm the weirdo who decided to make a show about this kind of stuff. It's all me. It's not Garrett. Garrett gets no credit whatsoever.
I don't exist.
Well, the article does make a point that I rather liked, that Osamu Sato's creations remain online, the focus of several obscure games graveyards, and the inspiration for lo-fi indie game creators looking to cobble something new from the ashes of the old, or in a specific case, rebuild one of Sato's games entirely. There is a Unity recreation of the game that people are attempting to put together. I attempted to download it, but the download kept failing for me, unfortunately.
Actually, same. I ran into that same issue. It's, I guess there's a lot of work that needs to be done on it still.
Which is unfortunate, but that's fine. It's a labor of love, and we can wait for it.
Oh, yeah.
But the inspiration for lo-fi indie games is something that immediately caught my attention, so I started looking for it. and I found it. In 2018, the game celebrated its 20th birthday. Happy 20th birthday
Happy 20. Nice.
for LSD Dream Emulator. A game jam was hosted on itch.io of Dream themed games. And they're simple. They were put together pretty quickly. None of them are anywhere near the depth of a game like LSD, which had a lot of professional artists working on it. But all of them kind of evoked aspects of LSD in really interesting ways. Uh, some of them were very straightforward, just walk from here to here, and visuals will be displayed as you do. Some of them had proper gameplay. Some of them were little puzzles. Some of them were just mazes with things to look at. Some were 2D, and some, I think most were 3-dimensional. And it was interesting to see that 20 years after this weird little obscure game came out, people were willing to put in all this effort to make more weird dream-based games and then post them on itch.io so they could get 23 downloads until I showed up and downloaded the game 3 times because I kept messing it up. Garrett, tell me, what feelings did the game conjure when you played it? What were you noticing most when playing this game? Like whether it was something you expected or not?
I have very mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I absolutely love it for how much it does things differently, and another, it's just a walking simulator, and I'm usually mad about those. And in another way, it just becomes like a genuinely like horrifying experience whenever the instance where you run into the dead guy and get teleported like 100 or so feet up in the air and then just start falling immediately. Like, that stuff's crazy. I don't like that.
No, there was genuinely a lot of moments of terror in such a primitive looking game.
Yeah, and I think the primitive nature of it makes it a lot more unsettling. Like, having the gray man walk up to you, just barely resembling a man, and just a very low poly model walking towards you is really
Basically
creepy.
a trench coat with a hat tipped
Yeah.
down over the face. Yeah.
There was a lot of instances where I'd see like these shapes moving, and then I look closer at it, and I'm like, wait, these are supposed to be people, and then it's really, it's just surreal. Which is obviously the point.
Yeah, there's an element of horror about those kinds of things that these are meant to be representations of humans, and you get this feeling that now you're playing a old video game cobbled together by some people trying to emulate a game cobbled together by some weird Japanese artists. But then when you see the 20-foot tall geisha like hovering along because her feet don't match up with her movement speed,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like nice little wooden clopping sounds for each footfall, and you see this faceless giant woman just strutting through this classic kind of, I don't know the names of the eras in Japan, but like one of those medieval style Japanese towns,
Feudal
like
Japan
the
town.
kind with the big old arches.
They got the roofs,
All towns generally have roofs, but
if you say so.
yes, you see her striding through this town, or hovering, I guess, and it's kind of terrifying. Like, she's not going to spin to look at you
Mm-hmm.
because she's like 8 polygons with different colors that resemble a geisha. But you always kind of don't want to get too close to her just in case she does. Some of the entities are openly malicious though, and will spin to either attack you or chase you off. Really, they're just hitting you and sending you into the next dream.
Mm-hmm.
The Gray Man being the exception, he disappears in a flash of white light. He doesn't actually send you to another dream. But there's the gargoyle that will spawn in the house sometimes. On the hearth, it'll be there.
Oh yeah.
Although I've noticed if you back into that room, it won't attack you as long as you're not looking at it. There's like I said, the lion that appears in one of the frickin' hyperbolic time chamber or whatever.
That's pretty much
Uh,
what that is, yeah.
yeah, but one of the areas got some real DBZ feel to it. Uh, a lot of these things, they'll leap at you, but tons of the stuff running around in the world is just on a little circuit, and you kind of have to purposely try and get in the way. There's that horse that strides through the natural world and teleports across ravines because I guess they couldn't figure out how to make it just not jump. I don't know what Warner Bros. Is doing, but it took me forever to try to actually get hit by that thing because it's so fast.
Mm-hmm. I ran into a similar issue with the train. That was kind of funny.
Oh, the one in the little Toyland.
Yeah, I really like the
Happy.
Toyland. There's a lot to do there.
Yeah, that area is really large too.
I'm actually really surprised for a PlayStation 1 game that has like so many unique environments. Most of them are like really huge. Like you can spend a lot of time exploring them. And whenever you do get teleported to them, it's always in a different spot.
Yeah, for the longest time, I had forgotten about the little royal chamber in Happy Town, and upon replaying it this time, I end up in Happy Town numerous times, and I didn't until like the third time or fourth time I was there. I remembered like, oh yeah, there's all these heralds, and you can walk past them and they'll blast their trumpets. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this like throne room with a also very creepy king and queen, like doing a little spinning dance around it. They look like tops. They don't even have feet. They just have points at the bottom, and it's like they're tops that someone set off spinning around. Um, I would make a Beyblade reference, but I can't
Why
conjure
don't you?
one.
Oh, okay.
I got nothing. Sorry.
Let it rip.
It there we go. Thank you. Big Beyblade hours. That one was interesting because that was the first time that I started seeing textures appearing glitched out because I hadn't saved in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went behind the thrones, and each of the thrones has a little crown hovering above it.
Yeah.
The backs of the crowns have unique textures, and both of them were stretched out faces of the little face critter that has like he's just like a head
Oh no.
with arms and legs. That one.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't know why he was there, but he was all squashed in the back of these crowns. I'm sure he wasn't having a good day.
Oh goodness. Okay.
Um, I guess all in all, the thing about this game is that like a million people have written up and talked about this game. Lots of people have done playthroughs of it, and a lot of people kind of overdo how scary they think it is or how confusing it is. The game is weird and hard to parse, to be fair, but I think it's mostly a matter of the language obfuscating what it's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Interestingly, a lot of the menu options are in English.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
was
if that's
really surprised by
common.
that.
I don't know if that's a common thing for Japanese games, but well, here we are. Um, what strikes me though about the game is that like there are moments that genuinely did scare the hell out of me. The thing with the baby, or giant man, whatever on earth he's supposed to
Giant
be.
man baby.
Yeah, the thing where I started getting the sexual textures, and there's a pair of sumo wrestlers in one room
Oh
that
yeah.
will headbutt each other, but their textures have been warped, so they were these god awful purple nightmares with giant lips and giant eyes. That scared the hell out of me. And the lion jumping at me. The gray man got me a couple of times in the old town, whose name I am forgetting. Kyoto, I think is what it's referred to. It's just like classic Japanese style
Mm-hmm.
buildings. I didn't know he could even appear there, and he did, and it scared the hell out of me. Um, there's like a lot of interesting things to see, but it is just kind of a tour of a strange little dreamscape in the end, with weird warping textures, and to act like it's this horrific thing or like it's this incomprehensible thing. I think it's just kind of missing the point in that it's just supposed to be like a fun little thing to experience. There's no gameplay, there's no enemies to fight or puzzles to solve. There's just a cool world to look around.
Again, it's the most non-game thing ever, and by
But
design, of course.
yeah, but I think the absence of those game mechanics is okay. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole debate that can be had, and I don't want to have it because you're all wrong and I'm right um, about what a game needs to have to be a game. I won't tell you what my opinion is. You can just guess and know that I'm correct. And if you pick the wrong one, then you're wrong, unfortunately.
Nice.
So any parting thoughts?
LSD Dream Emulator is a very fascinating little bit of game history, which constructs what it means to be a video game and opens up discussion about games being considered art. Uh, Out of my entire playthrough, I very much enjoyed it, and I would probably go back to play it again on my own time. I highly recommend getting it. Uh, get it set up on an emulator. The only, barrier to entry is that you have to download an emulator and then get the ROM and then fiddle around with the settings and whatnot. But I'd say it's worth it just to play around with a few hours and just explore some really trippy environments.
Yeah, I didn't want to spoil all that much because a lot of the value in the game is just seeing the things for yourself.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, turn off the lights, get just a little bit drunk, and plug in a controller and try playing it. Make sure no one else is home, and leave your door open.
Oh no, don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the game isn't scary enough, so you have to spook yourself a little extra, you know? Get
I
yourself
see where you're
real,
going.
like,
Yeah.
maybe don't get drunk then. Maybe that'll make you too comfortable. I'm not sure. Uh,
Just take some
don't,
LSD.
do not, I do not endorse that.
I do.
Just take some mushrooms instead. I think that it is something worth playing if you're interested in obscure games, if you want to just see the workings of a strange but fascinating mind. Uh, if that's something you're interested in, and you want more after playing this Eastern Mind: The Lost Souls of Tong Nu, which we will also link to, uh, is a fascinating little thing. It's
I
a point-and-click adventure game made by the same guy 4 years prior.
Have you
Um,
played it?
I have not, but I have seen bits of playthroughs, and it looks incredible. And it's got a lot of the motifs that would end up being used in LSD,
Oh.
a lot of similar art elements. But I think it's quite worth playing. You can find it somewhere for free. Uh, I'm almost certain it's released on the PC, but I can't remember for sure where you can get it for the PC.
I'll have to check it out. Do some research.
Yeah, quite worth playing if you're into that kind of thing. Well, I think that's about all I had to say for today.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you all for listening. And if you have any suggestions for future content, feel free to email us or leave a comment below. We will link all the appropriate stuff below the video.
Yep. Uh, that's it. Have a good night, everybody. Good day.
See ya.
See ya.